everyone, welcome to your favorite show, Starspod, and I remain your humble host, Temitope Karim. On today's episode, we have the humble Mayowa Fageyinbo. She is a social justice scholar who focuses on providing quality education for the African descent. Mayowa has traveled several countries, projecting education and ensuring that the African child has the best when it comes to education. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with me, Mayowa.
You're welcome, Mayowa. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're welcome. So let's start by saying, who are you? Who is Mayowa?
Who is Mayowa? I think for me, I see a lot of my purpose within the name because in like Yoruba culture, Nigerian culture, our names have meanings, and I see it as like a manifestation of my purpose. So I've been quoted to say that I see my purpose as joy through education, but I also see myself as just someone who embodies joy, who embodies fruitfulness, and inspires people to break through. And I've just so happened to focus in on a quality education as the means of breaking through, and the means of understanding each other better, having intercultural competence, and us being able to move forward as a people. That's been the vehicle.
Okay, so your dream, thank you so much. So your dream about education for the African descent.
Yeah.
What actually birthed this dream and when did it start?
I'm sorry.
What birthed this dream? What brings this dream? What brings about the dream? And
Yeah, of course. I think it's many things. I think even the fact that, my parents left Nigeria in the 1980s to come to the US, and now I'm right back here again talking about education. You know what I mean? I think the idea that we're all part of a global community, and the idea that there's just so much for us to learn from one another. Our histories, our current realities are so interconnected between the Americas and Africa, the Caribbean, Latin America. And I'm really passionate about people, and I'm really passionate about us as African descendants knowing one another's history, knowing one another's struggle, and knowing that we're connected. And I think when it comes to education, in particular, one of the reasons why my parents left was for education purposes, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like in the perfect world, we would not have to leave Africa. It won't happen in our generation.
Yeah, yes.
It'll happen generations down the line. And it takes a global collective diasporic effort to build the infrastructure, to build the labor force capacity, to do the skill force capacity, and so on and so forth. But I think that's the dream for me. And there's already interest in the diaspora in re-engaging the continent in countless ways. I think by having people who have that connection already to help build the infrastructure, to build the people, so people are informed in a very authentic way, as opposed to just coming and trying to make mini America or mini Europe and Africa.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I'm really passionate about education because if it wasn't for the education that I received, I wouldn't be here with you now.
Definitely.
You know what I mean? Like you mentioned that I'm a social justice scholar at UPenn, the University of Pennsylvania. That's how I got here is UPenn. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do understand.
Yeah. So I think education has a way of opening doors for people. And when we invest in education, not just in America, but also for people of African descent in Africa, the ways that we will open opportunities are endless. They're countless, and we should be investing more in that in the continent itself
right now. So as I went through your LinkedIn profile and I was really impressed.
Yeah.
So I can see all you're doing.
Yeah.
I've seen everything. Let me see some of the things you are doing because it's just what you put out there that we can see with the audience. Of course. So what was your dream as a child? What was it you wanted to become? Has it always been about education, or you were one of those kids that wanted to grow up and become a medical doctor, or wanted to grow up and become a lawyer? Oh no, I wanted to become a banker. Yeah. What was your dream like? And when did it start to change and you feel, okay, let me just do education?
I would say I had a very unique upbringing in the sense where my parents did not push me to be a lawyer or a doctor or engineer. That's a very common thing.
I think that's because they were not in Nigeria, because the normal Nigerian parents, if you're not a lawyer, you're not a doctor, you're not an engineer, then what are you doing?
But you know what? Even in the States, they still do that. You know what I mean? They still push their children because they don't want you to come and waste the opportunity that they gave you in this country for you to come and do nothing. To come and do nothing in this country. So you have to continue the legacy of fruitfulness in some way. But I think my mother was I come from a family of creatives. Okay. And so I think my mother was very open to what I would do. And she used to encourage us to do well in whatever we chose to do. And in many ways, it feels like how even being back here in Nigeria feels like a full circle moment. My life journey has been full circle. I started off, I went into acting, went into singing. I was not an actress, but a lot of the times I didn't really appreciate it, right? I started off at Howard University at first in journalism, right? And then I went on to switch to psychology because I realized that a lot of the suffering that we hold in the mental health,
Yes,
it needs to be
it really needs to be
policy.
looked into.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
But then I went on to think to myself, these challenges and well-being, they're
Then you looked into something else.
I did, because the challenges we have in well-being are influenced by policy failures and infrastructure failures. So it's like I felt helpless being in mental health and doing the one-to-one. And so then now it's like I'm taking my policy interests, international education interests,
and not just to one person, like globally.
Yeah, globally,
yes.
In terms of like how we interact within, not just within the continent of Africa, but with diasporans abroad as well. And these policy interests have honestly metamorphosed and meddled with my originating communication interests, because now I'm here on a policy communications internship. Like, you know what I mean? So it all kind of like came together. And everything that I've learned along the way with psychology and human behavior has helped me, as someone who wants to do policy, understand the individual experience better. So I'm not just looking at a bird's eye view. I'm understanding how the choices we make in our institutions impact the individual person itself. So it all kind of came together, but it was a very beautiful, eclectic journey that I think just beautifully unfolded over time. And every direction was like a divine redirection to lead me to this point where I have a very like robust and interdisciplinary view on things I do.
Okay, so why did you focus on education and social justice reform? Why exactly do you think, okay, I just want to focus into, I want to do this?
Of course. Yeah. So I've actually been doing education before. That's the part I left out. I've been doing education before I even realized I was an educator. I don't think I ever identified as a teacher, but like, for example, some of my earliest endeavors, I don't know what you call middle school here. Is it junior secondary school?
Yeah, that's junior secondary school.
Yeah, junior secondary school. I was working with students with disabilities through what we call the Special Olympics for children there, holding small session groups. Moved on to secondary school. I was part of what we call the Dream Team, daring to role model excellence as athletic mentors. So I ran track. Wow. Yes. And I went to people, I was in secondary school, going to people in junior secondary school, educating people about health and wellness, about being tobacco free, about just living a healthy lifestyle, being athletes as well at the time in the state of North Carolina. And then I moved on. I was doing educational workshops with children who lived in a shelter. I was also doing educational workshops on mental health. I moved on. I worked for Howard University.
So you've been doing all this before
it even occurred to me that I'm in education. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like, the journey really unfolded, I think, the way it was meant to, and all the things I picked up along the way just edified and complemented where I am now.
Okay. Yeah. So what would you say? Let's come back to Nigeria now. Yeah. What would you say is the state of education in Nigeria compared to every other country you've been to?
So I've been to a couple. I would say one cool thing for just focusing on the continent is, one thing I would like people to know is that we're not all the same. You can't just put a blanket on the entire continent and think this is it. So
we're not even growing the same rate. We're not growing at the same rate. So definitely it can't be the same.
It can't. Really. And it's funny because, I think just yesterday I was telling someone, based on my experience in Botswana, it's like I've heard some people say, oh, they've spoiled the youth, because if you're a Botswana citizen and you go to a university there, it's fully paid for. Wow. And you even get a living stipend. And
that's
they
impressive.
have
can I move to Botswana?
Yeah. I'm serious.
Let me just do one more degree there.
I'm serious. And it's funny because that's in Nigeria, but even in that country, they have their own pitfalls and things are not perfect. Don't get me wrong. But I think in Nigeria, I'm seeing a difference in like what they want out of governance. I'm sure that's very timely. It's a chronic issue. And I'm seeing things in terms of like access to school for people who are lower income or like low cost private schools. There's a different terrain here that I think it makes it unique. And I think there's a level of like hustle in the culture that's been like embedded. Like, you know what I mean?
It's there. Every Nigerian has to hustle.
Yes. And that one song by Ira Star where she's like, you must hustle if you want joy.
If you want to eat.
If you want to eat.
She said you want chop. So if you want to eat, you really have to hustle.
Yes.
Because nobody will bring it to you in Nigeria.
And it was the other day I was talking with my friend from Kenya, and we were in South Africa at the time, and we were just thinking to ourselves, there's less of a hustle energy in this era right now. We were referring to Nigeria, actually. Like, it's not to say people aren't hustling elsewhere, but I think the tone is
just a Nigerian spirit.
Every place has its own spirit. And I think that is embedded into the culture, is embedded into how we do things, into our policies. And I think even now we're seeing like youth really but kind of try to set a new tone of better governance and economic justice, and it bleeds into things like education. Ultimately, I think the future that people want is a future where we feel supported to thrive in every area of our lives, and economic justice and good governance really does bleed into every single area of our lives. And so, without going like too deep on that soapbox, considering our time, I just think that the air in Nigeria, to me, it's a country where youth want to thrive, and I think that we're in a space where there's a lot of opportunity. There's this place is like we're called the Giant of Africa for a reason.
Yeah, for a reason.
And it's not because we're faking. I think there's so much incredible talent here
that we need just to tap into and
explore.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful, like last time I was here, I went to a conference called Entertainment Week, Lagos, and I think it was the second year in existence, and it just the pure, just raw with what they have. We do so much. You know what I mean? And to me, it's like, last thing I'll say, I feel like in a perfect world, we wouldn't just be like, oh, donate to us, give us this laptop, give us this. We would be really looking at us as like the teachers, because we have a lot to teach you. If you give us that 5G broadband internet that's consistent, we will run laps around everybody, because with what we have, we do so much already, and we're already known around the world for our creative endeavors and the things that we do. So
I think this also, this Nigerian spirit is actually seen all over the world. I think, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, we were at the US consulate office to cover something, and the consulate general was saying something. So it was Education USA. The students were living, on scholarship to study in the United States of America, and he said something. He mentioned that he wants them to remember the fact that they are from Nigeria, and they shouldn't forget the also spirit. So then it occurred to me that, okay, everyone knows that every Nigerian also, you just don't sit there to expecting everything to just come to you freely and that. So on that note, I would love to ask you that what are some of the initiatives you've been a part of, or you've created, that has actually reformed maybe a certain particular set of people, a society? Just, I know it's not just one. Just give me an example of some of these initiatives.
Sure. Yeah. So I would think one thing that I started off in January with the help of a community of people at UPenn and other people who were advising me as well. So it wasn't just me by myself who supported this launch, but it's called Diaspora Dialogues.
We are still coming to Diaspora Dialogue. Actually, I saw it on your LinkedIn. We are coming to talk about
I would say that if we're coming to that, maybe we'll come to that later.
Okay.
But I think another thing is through the engagement through the UN Permanent Forum for people of African descent as a civil society member. So it's more like a consultant group to advise the forum how to improve. But we attend the sessions, and I've been extremely privileged to attend the sessions both in New York and Geneva, and to be part of the youth subcommittee for the civil society working group. And I think with that alone, being able to educate people about different things going on in Black human rights globally, and have the opportunity to craft a strategy to both hit the grassroots and the, what we call micro level interventions and interactions, but also envision a world where we're changing the landscape of policy to advance global Black human rights. It's really cool, and I've got to meet a lot of really great people from all over the world, but due to this one group, which we're just such a diverse international group. Yeah.
So you believe in culturally relevant education curriculum.
Yeah.
Do you think Nigeria is really doing well in that space?
I just left the school today, actually, the Charterhouse Lagos, and I think that there's a trend when it comes to innovation in what they call quote unquote developing countries or systematically underdeveloped countries. But I think for me, yes. And
no,
I think that yes, and
so you want to say yes and no?
So I don't want to, but yes, but
okay.
I think in a perfect world, there would be more of us being self-sustained and without having to rely on like foreign involvement or a foreign school coming into Nigeria. I would love to see, Nigerians who, whatever generations down the line, they have like the opportunity to get a truly robust international education, access to education that's not too costly. School fees are not something that will keep somebody out of school. So I think yes, and the goal is self-sustenance. And I think that it'll take a lot of work to get there, but that's the goal.
You said something now, and I would love us to talk about it. You mentioned school fees that would not kick people out, ensuring that, and the education is very, very affordable.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think is it the UN or something that said education should be free.
Yeah.
It's in the curriculum. Sorry,
Mm.
the is it called law right now that education should be free to
Mm.
all. Now, the Nigerian government brought up something called
Mm.
the student loan.
Mm.
I know you've heard about it, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I know it happens in some other countries, yeah,
Yeah.
where you get this loan and later
Mm.
you repay it and all of that. Do you think it's a nice initiative for Nigeria right now? Do you
No.
think that is what the Nigerian student
No.
really need?
Sorry, you have to finish that sentence. I
Okay.
think loans and really tricky or contentious like financial agreements are part
Yeah.
of the reason why we're in the situation we are now. Many
We keep
African
on
countries
borrowing.
keep on borrowing, and
Yeah.
they put you in situations for lock you in for 30, 40 years in these contracts. I think that's something we should avoid. And I just think I don't know how far they would take these loans, but I hope that it doesn't include like a small child.
No. It's
Oh,
just
yeah.
for university students and all
Oh,
that.
I'm against loans, if I'm being honest with you. I'm truly against loans. So I know I have a bit of a radical point of view. So my answer would be no, just because if people already, wanting more affordable cost of living, and they're really upset about inflation, and they're upset
Yeah.
about what will loans now do to you, like,
Mm.
and I think that's kind of putting more burden, immediate relief for long-term burden.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think solutions should be what can we do here and now to subsidize the cost and make it affordable, and to just refine the infrastructure that we have already.
Okay, so talk to me about Diaspora Africa, your project.
Yeah. So Diaspora Dialogues.
Diaspora Dialogue, rather.
Yeah,
So
no,
talk to me about Diaspora Dialogue.
Oh, sure. It's
What birthed it? When did
Yeah.
it start? What's the purpose?
Yeah.
Where are you going? About just talk to me
Absolutely.
about it.
Yeah. So Diaspora Dialogues, as I mentioned earlier, it was started in January of 2024, so
Okay,
earlier
this
this year.
It's still very young.
It's still very young. It's still in its infancy stages, you guys.
Yeah.
And I think the idea is that people, if I'm someone who I've walked across multiple places, met many people, and I just didn't want to just sit on that information. In the past, I've mentioned that even my childhood growing up in the States, I have a sister who's half Jamaican. I had a caretaker who's also Caribbean. I grew up around Afro Latinos, African Americans. And I think my childhood was very special. And so that there was this intercultural influence, both in my immediate surroundings, but also within my home. Because as people who are Nigerians or Africans abroad, you simultaneously have the American and the African influence and perspectives put into you. And so in my mind, I know I come from a family of travelers on my dad's side as well. And so I think it's very, very, important so that we not just sit on what we know, but we share it, but in a way that's actually meaningful. And so I chose to focus on technology, media, art, those types of discussions. But not just talking about what art is or what technology is, but also like from a social justice perspective. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
We had a session called Actualization Through Creation. And the idea was that creation itself is something that we often see as, I don't know if the word is static, but I'll say it's still. Just a picture on a wall. It's not really something that you see as a motivator to enact change, to ignite social movements, right? But in my life, creation has been something that I was born into with my family. And it's something that I keep coming back to. And at times where I've been super low, creation is something I could still do when I felt like I couldn't even get out of bed.
That just keeps you going.
Keeps you going, right? But funnily enough, some of the things that would depress me are the things that were influenced by policy issues, and how in America, which is a predominantly white country, how Black people oftentimes are treated or perceived, or issues around diversity are being handled. And so it has like an individual impact on you, even though it's political.
Just heartbreaking. But
You know what I
personally,
mean?
you just see it as something,
And so actualization, it was actually called self-actualization through creation, because the idea is that whatever you do, whatever you create, it's not just something that is sitting on a wall or a graphic that goes on Instagram. It actually has the power to inspire, to foster individual joy, like my name, but also foster community joy and social movements, which then brings about political change. And so we had people go through multiple rooms, who in each room there was a leader from around the world who's of African descent, from Zimbabwe, from Colombia, from America, from the Caribbean. And each room was inspired by a different theme. And there was also a complementary activity or artistic thing to do in the room. And so people learned about what African descendants around the world were doing. and they also had opportunity to put creation within the context of social justice, of advocacy, of political change. And then afterwards, we had a really great debriefing discussion. I also asked people to wear something that signals joy. If it's this bracelet, someone wore that, or someone just ran a marathon, so they wore their medal, things like that. It was a very beautiful session.
Okay, you said on your LinkedIn that you're a curator of joy.
Yeah,
joy giver.
Yeah, curator of joy.
Literally. So, if you're not working, if you're not doing policy, you're not doing social change, and not doing education, what are you doing? What else do you do outside of all of this?
I just love being outside. I
just creating joy and spreading joy.
I'm so serious. I'm telling you, I love adventure. I have a thing with waterfalls these days and hiking, being around water. I just love being around the people that I care about me and I care about them. I'm very intentional about community. I love hosting people. Like, I'll message my friends. Nollywood, it's a huge thing. It'll never die.
Yeah.
It'll never die. But I also love South African movies these days. So I would say, let's come over to my place. Let's watch a South African film. I'm very, I just love community, and I love being outside. I like what we call flea markets. It's like cheap goods that are like maybe, like art, clothes, things like that. Going out, going to random events, lectures. I just do whatever feels good when I have the time.
So with your stay in Nigeria, I hope you really explored the little places. Did you?
Yeah,
adventures. You traveled.
I ventured a bit. I've seen different places here, not as much as I would like, considering I'm also here for an internship. But just considering the time we have left with us today, I think I would just say that I'm really happy. I'm happy to be able to see Nigeria, make these professional connections, and get more of a day-to-day understanding of what it's like being here versus just doing Dirty December.
Okay, so you're a first generation college student.
Yes.
Yeah, and okay, how do you think that is gonna help you bring Nigerians, just bring out the best in the younger Nigerians?
Being a first generation American, you said?
Yeah.
How that brings I think first generation anything, people who are the first, we know a lot about initiating and beginning new cycles and ushering new eras of existence. Not to be dramatic, but I think a lot of what I've experienced and the experiences I've shared with others have been experiences that are first. Like, even at my school that I'm graduating from now, School of Social Policy and Practice, I was a student who helped establish Leadership Collective, which is a group for students of African descent in a school that, again, is predominantly white. So it was a space where they're able to really hone into their cultural and ethnic identity and feel like they have a safe space and learn from other people of African descent on different relevant issues around policy, around social work, around advocacy, and things like that. I think we just have the power to create change and the power to enact and to initiate, because that's what we were born into. So,
because what would you tell a young person out there watching this show, and just wanting to become the next Mayowa or wanting to do what you do? What advice do you have for that kind of person?
I mean, I think honestly, I don't know if I should look in the camera, looking at you.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, so
I just tell the person.
Yeah, telling you. I think that, to me, with my name being Joy, I see life as a beautiful journey that unfolds in its own divine time, and that comes with hard work. It comes with a strategy, but oftentimes I think staying curious and being open to new things, going to that next event, speaking to this next person. All the things that I've happened, the best experiences of my life were because I wasn't afraid to be creative and I wasn't afraid to just go my own way when other people may have been telling me to go in a different direction. If you're hard-headed or stubborn like me, I'm the type of person where sometimes I need to see the other side before you tell me not to go there. Before you tell me not to see the consequence before you know. I'm not foolish. I'm not going to put myself in a very bad situation. But sometimes people, they will project their insecurities onto you and make it seem like you can't do something. And I think it's important to be able to have discernment to know when something is just simply not for you, or if you're just scared, or if someone else is scared on your behalf and they're telling you not to do it because they're too scared to do it themselves. So I think, I think being curious, I think also keeping in mind that everything is political. Our existence, the things we struggle with, the things we're happy about. And so if you can find a way, when all else fails, when you feel hopeless, you have your voice, you have the power to advocate. There's always power. There's always another avenue, because when you give up, that's surely the end.
Okay. So we just don't want the show to be very, very serious, too serious. So we're just going to play one game. Yeah. Before we leave, it's a tongue twister. Okay. You're going to say it 5 times. Okay. Very fast. Sure. No mistake. Okay. So you're on the spot, not me. Okay. So I'll just pronounce it slowly. Where she sits, she shines quickly.
Where she sits, she shines. Where she
okay.
Woo, where she sits, she shines. Where she sits, she shines. Where she sits, she shines. Where she sits, she shines.
One more time.
Where she sits, she shines.
That's good. So when people see you, they say, okay, my wife is not always too serious. There's this fun part of her.
I'm very fun.
Yeah, very fun.
You know, I'm a very, very fun person. Actually, people know me as a fun person. I get very passionate. The word's passionate, I think.
Yeah, so thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's really nice having you around, you know, seeing what you do, what you really, your passion for Africa and, you know, just the world at large. I'm really grateful. Let me say on behalf of, we're grateful for what you do for education.
Yeah.
For what, I love people who are passionate about education, you know, just trying to see that the African children, you know, get educated and all of that. So thank you so much for watching. Till I come your way again on the next episode, I remain Temitope Karim. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Bye.
All right.
Thank
you.